The next speaker is Charlie D. As I introduced him earlier, as a vice president of the American Federation of Teachers, the union that represents the instructors at Milwaukee Area Technical College, and a longtime progressive activist.
Thanks, John, and thanks all of you for coming. I'm not a public school teacher. I'm not a K through 12 teacher, but I do teach in a public college, Milwaukee Area Technical College. I've been in Milwaukee for 35 years and have been active in dozens of school board races over that time. And I just want to tell you, after listening to what Dr. Bonds said, who would you rather have choosing the next superintendent of Milwaukee Public Schools, Tom Barrett or Dr. Bonds? I mean, this isn't even close. And Tom Barrett is a neighbor of mine. He's been a friend for almost 30 years. I've supported him in every race he's run in, and I can tell you that I can't imagine myself ever supporting him again because of what he is doing here. And he was invited to come here, and first said he would be here on the panel, and then yesterday afternoon, all of a sudden, he isn't going to come. Well, after hearing how articulate and knowledgeable Dr. Bonds is, I can see why he didn't show up. But basically, this takeover, this attempted takeover, puts politics above education and using a justification that is Orwellian in its reversal of cause and effect. Basically, every argument that Barrett and Doyle have used, and we have their talking points now because not everyone in their offices agrees with them, every argument they were using takes the right-wing approach to education. That is, looking at things like poverty, joblessness, violence, and instead of understanding that what goes on in urban school systems is a reflection of the state of those communities, rather what they're doing is reversing cause and effect. And Barrett says, because of these things, I have to take over the schools, as if the schools were the cause of the very pathologies that he has done absolutely nothing to address. As Michael points out, Mr. Mayor, if you can't address the racial disparity in potholes, who in the world would think you can address the racial disparity in education? Now, I just want to touch from a slightly different angle, same perspective, but slightly different information than what Michael raised on a couple of the arguments that Barrett has made, and that Doyle, who's been largely silent since his initial bringing up of this, he's been largely silent on it. But I want to add a couple things. In terms of this racial achievement gap, let me emphasize, the mayor has no plan, as Michael pointed out. Secondly, if Jim Doyle is so concerned about the racial achievement gap in education, both Madison, Wisconsin and Beloit, Wisconsin have larger racial achievement gaps than Milwaukee, but he's not trying to change those governance systems, is he? No, he's not at all. So might this have something to do with a run for governor where Tom Barrett can do what every other candidate for governor on the Republican side has done in the last 30 years, is try to, as Tommy Thompson said, stick it to Milwaukee. Remember, we haven't had in 100 years, maybe it's been, I think it's almost 100 years, a governor elected who is a citizen of Milwaukee County. And so in the calculus, the perverse political calculus, the only thing that the Barrett people can come up is, I can have this image around the rest of the state of sticking it to Milwaukee if I have changed and who is in charge of the school board and taking over myself. I don't think it's going to work, but I think it's horrible, and we all have to oppose it. I also want to raise where Tom Barrett was yesterday. Do any of you know where he was yesterday? He was in Washington, D.C. He was visiting, was he at 2nd and North? Okay, well, I heard announced that he was going to Washington, D.C., maybe it's next Friday.
No, it's this week.
It was?
Yeah.
To meet with Michelle Rhee, who is the superintendent of the Washington Public Schools, who was appointed once the mayor took over the Washington Public Schools. And if any of you are considering supporting this takeover, here's what you're going to get. You're going to get a superintendent on the order of Michelle Rhee, who had exactly 2 years of classroom experience. As one of my friends put it, she saw one planet and thought she understood the constellation. But what she essentially is the Robert McNamara of education. Because remember, Robert McNamara was the head of the Whiz Kids when he became Secretary of Defense. Quantifying everything was Robert McNamara's approach. And as he said over and over again during the Vietnam War, by every quantifiable measure, we're winning. And it was 40 years after that war when it would do no good, when he finally published his memoirs and said, I was wrong. Well, Michelle Rhee hasn't yet admitted she's wrong, but here's what she's done. Everything is about the numbers of the test scores of the students. And her whole approach to reforming the system is to teach to the test. What they do is this technique where they figure the smart kids who are already doing fine, they'll do fine on their own. The worst kids, we don't have to pay attention to them. Let's identify these kids in the middle who, if we drill on the questions they got wrong and filling in the bubble last week, we'll be able to raise our scores. And then she offered financial incentives to teachers and principals if the test scores in their school went up. So I trust none of you will be surprised to find that 2 days ago in the Washington Post there was an article that Michelle Rhee has covered up a cheating scandal where it was clear that all kinds of answers in a school whose achievement went dramatically up in 1 year, and the principals and teachers got that money, and then all of a sudden the testing agency, the National Testing Agency, has repeatedly told the Washington Public Schools, and Rhee has covered this up, that there are far too many erasures on this to take these group of tests to take it seriously. But you all understand scandals when there are monetary incentives, but let's go to one other level, what it means to teaching our kids. Tom Barrett as mayor should not be trying to take over a school system where he is trying to have the power to appoint a superintendent who will be a Michelle Rhee little robot. What he should be doing is fighting to get the things that have been removed from the Milwaukee Public Schools and no longer exist in the Washington Public Schools, where they're spending all their resources on testing, and that is music, art, the pleasure of students reading a book during the day. And I actually can't believe what has happened to my friend, Tom Barrett. Probably he'll soon be my former friend, because of how he has shifted. He would never want to send his children to the kinds of schools that Michelle Rhee, the drilling over and over again, the kind of schools that she is creating in Washington, D.C., all for the purpose of raising test scores. Now, the final point I want to make, actually two final points. The second is what you can do about it. I want you to think about, Michael mentioned this, that this is about the business community taking over. The Metropolitan Milwaukee Association of Commerce and the primary business interests in Milwaukee, all of whom live in the suburbs, none of whom send their kids to MPS, most of whom don't even send their kids to public schools, but private schools. They have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in our school board elections for the past 20 years. And they have lost control. Michael was elected by a 6-3 majority, okay? But the business community has usually had, over the past 20 years, a 5-4 majority. So they have lost out. And think of what? When they were in charge of the school board, what did we get? A horrible superintendent, this guy Andrikopoulos, and they, for the last 10 years, have attacked any, has he been in there for 10? I don't know. Eight, sorry. Last 8 years, they've attacked anybody who tried to hold him accountable as being anti-reform. And who have they been followed in that effort by? The Chamber of Commerce, the Bradley Foundation, and the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. And that is the same coalition that is pushing this mayoral takeover. 13 years ago, when there was a brief 1 year when the voucher people, the pro-privatization people, only had 4 votes on the school board, and Tommy Thompson was still governor, there was all this talk of the governor taking over the school board. As soon as the next school board election and that 5-4 majority flipped to the voucher people, all the talk of takeover was over. And so there has not been a single word of takeover when the voucher people were in charge, but now that we finally get real people who have concern about education and aren't just toadies for the business community, all of a sudden it comes up again and the mayor joins in with these right-wing forces to take it over. Here's exactly how hypocritical it is. My college, Milwaukee Area Technical College, is a tax-supported institution. We have an appointed board. It's appointed by the school board presidents within the area, the geographical area of Milwaukee Area Technical College. The Chamber of Commerce, backed by the Journal-Sentinel, has spent a lot of money, but even more time, trying to get its own people appointed to the MATC board and has failed. So what do you think the Journal-Sentinel, the Bradley Foundation, and the Chamber of Commerce are calling for with MATC? An elected board. So what they want to change the MPS from an elected board to an appointed board because they can't control the elections. Then they want to change MATC from an appointed board to an elected board because there's no common denominator of principle here. The only thing is a common denominator of power and control.